Hello, this is Jocelyn Montgomery, and I'm here to present a module for the California Association of Health Facilities on psychological first aid that is designed for directors of staff development to use in their facilities to train CNAs, nurses. Actually, any staff in the facility could benefit from this instruction today, but it's specifically designed for you to give to CNAs in that it meets the requirements from the California Department of Public Health in terms of lesson plan, learning activities, quiz, and the required amount of time, which is 50 minutes. My name is Jocelyn Montgomery. I am a nurse. I have worked with the California Association Health Facilities Disaster Program for over a decade, and I'm also a Red Cross volunteer, which is where I received the training that I'm going to share with you today called Psychological First Aid. This PowerPoint is available for download without the audio so that you can use it in your facilities, whether or not you're on the internet. However, the version that we have for you today does contain two hyperlinks, which will take you to some short videos on psychological first aid that are available through YouTube. So you will find those in this version, and you're welcome to make those part of your learning activity should you have access to the internet. Also posted with this PowerPoint will be a lesson plan and two handouts, which you'll see in the course of this PowerPoint presentation. So our objectives today are to teach you the importance of recognizing the impact, psychological impact that people experience when they are involved in a disaster or even a traumatic event that causes a change to their life somehow, and to recognize the common reactions that people will often exhibit after going through that disaster-related stress. Once we've discussed that, we're going to talk about psychological first aid as an approach that you can use that will help people to recover more quickly and get on the road to recovery in a way that is positive after they've gone through the event. Also, this approach can be used wherever you see people going through intense stress. It can be used with your family, with your coworkers, with your residents, and your friends, and even yourself. So I think you'll find it to be of value above and beyond its relevance to the emergency preparedness scenario. Okay, let's talk, first of all, this is module number 1. This is designed to be done in about 15 minutes. There are 3 modules, so you could actually start this training and do 15 minutes and the quiz, and then come back to it at another time to do module 2 and 3 instead of doing it in one 50-minute session. It's designed for you to do it that way. But in module 1, we're going to talk about the emotional stress that people experience in disasters and in significant emergencies. Emotional distress isn't always as visible as a physical injury, but it can be just as painful and just as debilitating. So first of all, let's talk about what I mean when I say the word disaster. So disaster is defined as a wide-scale emergency event that has a severe impact on the community. Basically, any event that is larger than the resources available to deal with it, whether it be a single family or a whole city, is considered a disaster. Commonly, large populations of people are traumatized all at once in a disaster event. And there can be an epidemic of survivor guilt and other psychological symptoms amongst the survivors after something like a tornado or a wildfire or a big earthquake hits their community. There's a chaotic element to disasters that can be very frightening, very disorienting, at least in the first few phases of it, with multiple stressors, not just one thing, but lots of ways to be scared and hurt, injured, or have your resources depleted. But again, even a smaller event like a single family fire or a sudden loss of a loved one, just one family, that can be a disaster for the survivors of that event. When there is a disaster in a community, resources are depleted and it's slow to recover. We've seen 2 years of recovery going on. It is not unusual after a big event like a hurricane or a massive wildfire. It takes a while for the community to bounce back. And as I said, everyone who experiences a disaster is affected, even the helpers. So I want you to recognize that even though you may not have gone through it, the people that are telling you their story and coming to you for help can have an impact on your stress. One of the good things about a disaster is that typically people pull together and resources do come from all directions. But that can take a while, and stress and grief are very common reactions to an uncommon situation. So let's talk about reactions. After a big event, some people will have very severe reactions. Maybe they'll show on the surface and maybe they won't. But most people recover from the disaster-related stress without professional help. Many times, though, they won't seek help. They feel like they should be strong, they should be stoic, they should be resilient, and they may not ask for help, especially from people they don't know, like helpers that come from another community. And in your case, if you accepted residents and staff from an evacuated facility, they don't know you. They may not ask for help. So one of the goals of psychological first aid is to teach you how to recognize the signs that someone is in distress and could use some help. So here's some common reactions to disaster stress. And I want to share with you that I personally have been evacuated multiple times because the community I live in is vulnerable to wildfires. And I, at some time, have probably been able to check every box on this page. So it's a very common experience for people to go through these kinds of reactions, especially when the adrenaline fades, the event is over, and they begin to come to grips with the staggering things that have happened to them. So these are the kinds of things that people often go through following a big event. How long do these last? Well, it varies. Most people exposed to a big traumatic event fully recover within a year, and the most intense symptoms will start to fade after just a few weeks. But they may persist, and if they persist, and we're going to talk about in a minute what some of the risk factors are for people to have trouble recovering on their own without professional help. So if they do persist over 4 to 6 weeks, or they're really severely impairing a person's ability to function, then probably they should seek some professional help. So here are some factors that may indicate that a person is more vulnerable, may benefit from seeking a professional counselor and some extended therapy. So that psychological first aid is still valuable for them in the first hours, but it may not be enough for some people. One of the things I'd like you to think about are the 3 R's in terms of trying to evaluate whether or not you're dealing with a person who might need more help. So the first R is reactions. If the person is really distraught, overwhelmed, unable to think clearly, unable to be calmed. They are expressing thoughts of self-harm or possibly severe anger and wanting to cause harm to someone else. That certainly is a red flag that that person is going to need more than psychological first aid. Another R is risk. So people who go through a very mass casualty, whole community event, something like the shootings at a school, something like a wildfire where 40 or 50 people are killed in their community and there's really widespread devastation, and maybe they witnessed some of that devastation. Those folks may benefit from professional help. And then the third R is resiliency. So most of us will bounce back. As I said, within a few weeks, we're going to be not having so many thoughts and feelings and, panic kinds of sensations. We're going to get better every day. But there are people who never really had good coping skills. Perhaps they've always been fragile psychologically. There's also people who this isn't the only thing that's happened to them. Bad stuff has occurred in their life, and recently they've lost a loved one, maybe within the last year. They're financially really overwhelmed, and this is going to put them into a bankruptcy situation, or they don't have any support. There's no one close to them that they can really lean on. So that may affect their ability to bounce back without professional help. So remember these three R's as the signs that psychological first aid is a beginning, but it may not be enough for them. Children and elders can be particularly sensitive from a traumatic emergency or disaster event. These kinds of experiences really mess with the routine, and as we know, the people that live in our facilities often become very dependent on their routines. Same thing with children. If they're separated from familiar caregivers or their family, that can be very, very difficult for elders and children from a familiar environment. So how many of our residents in our nursing homes have memorized their way around the building, and those cues are all different, and they get somewhere new and all of a sudden they can't find their way. That can be very, very difficult. And I want to caution you that you may not see these signs right away. It could take a few hours, it could take a few days, even a couple of weeks before people start to really process what they've been through and start to exhibit the signs of stress. So this is the end of Module 1, and this is the quiz that we have provided for you so that you can take advantage of this as an in-service education with the Department of Public Health. The first question is, true or false, all people are impacted by a disaster, even those that come to help others? Number 2, all people need professional mental health services after a disaster experience. Question number 3, common reactions after a disaster include feelings of guilt, anger, hopelessness, loss of control, difficulty sleeping, remembering or paying attention, headaches, digestive problems, dizziness, a tightness in the chest, or all of the above. And what do the 3 R's stand for is question number 4. Reactions, risk factors, resilience factors, respect, reassurance, regular factors, routine, respect, rest factors, or none of the above. True or false, all people are impacted by a disaster, even those that come to help others? The answer to that is true. Number 2, all people need professional mental health services after a disaster experience? The answer to that is false. Question number 3, common reactions after a disaster include feelings of guilt, anger, hopelessness, loss of control, difficulty sleeping, remembering or paying attention, headaches, digestive problems, dizziness, a tightness in the chest, or all of the above. The answer is D, all of the above. Very common stress reactions. And what do the 3 R's stand for is question number 4. Reactions, risk factors, resilience factors, respect, reassurance, regular factors, routine, respect, rest factors, or none of the above. The answer to that is A. And again, these are the factors that may influence whether or not a person needs more than psychological first aid. Now we're going to begin module number 2, and we're going to discuss what psychological first aid is. It's actually a tool that we can all use to reduce our stress level and the stress of others. And by understanding common stress reactions and utilizing psychological first aid principles, you can enhance the resilience in yourself, your family, your workplace, and your community. If you have access to the internet, I suggest that you go to YouTube and watch the 5-minute video here where psychological first aid is described. And but I am also going to cover all that information, so if you don't have access to it, you'll still get the information. Psychological first aid, as I said, is an approach. It's actually an evidence-based approach that's used to ease suffering of disaster survivors, both physical and emotional. It improves the survivor's short-term functioning and promotes emotional recovery after an event. It addresses the basic needs of people, and it reduces psychological stress by providing a caring, comforting presence and giving education to the survivors on what common stress reactions they can expect. It empowers the individual by supporting their strengths and encouraging existing coping skills, and it provides connections to their natural support networks and referrals to professional services when needed. The goal of psychological first aid is to promote an environment of safety, calm, connectiveness on an emotional level, self-reliance for the survivors, and hope. It's simple and it's practical, and it can be used in any setting. It can be provided anywhere that trauma survivors can be found, in your facilities, in disaster shelters, schools, hospitals, private homes, the workplace, and the community setting. One thing that happened to me many years ago is I was driving into my valley, and a neighbor of mine was in the car in front, and they flipped their car. And the driver was very, very injured, and an ambulance came for them, but his wife was fine, and I took her to the hospital. Well, we had a 30-minute drive, and in that time, I could have been practicing, if I had known, the principles of psychological first aid to help her be in a much more calm place when we got to the hospital. The core actions of psychological first aid, and you're going to get when you get the handouts that come with this, you're going to see that some of these are grouped differently, but they're basically all the same thing. And if you take this training from the Red Cross or somewhere else, it may not have exactly 8 bullets, but it's really pretty much all the same principles. So we're going to go over these, each one briefly. The first and most important thing for you to consider if you are going to help others is to take care of yourself. So the stress of a disaster event is contagious, and it's very easy to start neglecting your own health and your own physical needs because you get caught up in the moment. So these are just some very simple take backs with you that you will be able to help others if you're maintaining a healthy routine. You know your limit and when to get help. You take breaks when your shift is done, You tap into your own support systems to maintain hope and do the things that help you feel well and calm, and don't deny yourself, or you won't be able to be there for the people you want to help. The very first move you make with survivors is you connect with them. As I said before, they may not reach out to you. They may not even recognize that they're in need. So you make the first move. If you don't happen to know this person already, introduce yourself in a calm voice, ask permission to talk. You may find that they're really overwhelmed, so what you need is patience. You need to just convey a sense of calm. Ask them about their immediate needs. What we find often is that they may have to think about that they're very much overwhelmed and confused, but they may have a need right away. Maybe their clothes are wet. Maybe, they're in pain. Maybe they need to make a phone call. And by asking what you can help them with immediately, you can really break the ice. Try to respect their privacy. Try to find a quiet place where they feel safe to talk. Just don't approach too closely or touch them if you're not familiar with their cultural background. Sometimes eye contact can be a little uncomfortable for certain cultural groups. So, you need to kind of read their reactions and come on in a slow way, protecting their personal safe space. And of course, you want to protect their confidentiality. What they share with you, you'll only share with appropriate others in order to help them. The next step is offer safety and comfort. So you've made your connection, you've found a safe, quiet place to talk. Make sure the environment is safe. If you're on the side of a road because of an auto accident, if you're in a building that's been impacted somehow, find a place where you don't have to put anyone at risk for further trauma. Help them with their immediate needs. As I said before, offer them a bottle of water, ask if they've had anything to eat. Do they need to use a bathroom? Are they very warm? Are they cold? Try to get them comfortable physically. Check and see if are they missing anything? Did they leave their glasses, their meds, their hearing aids behind? That may affect their ability to really work with you at that moment. So it's a good thing to figure that out first. And then if you are in a place that's had a very big event, don't have the news on. If it's by a window and you can see damage outside, pull the drapes, get rid of the newspaper headlines, and don't try to relive that event with them. It could actually cause more suffering. So protect them from further trauma. Now, you may need to stop right there if the person shows sign of immediate danger. Obviously, if they are threatening to harm themselves or others in those first few minutes that you're talking to them, that's a time to send for help. You may not want to leave them alone, but you may want to send for help right away. And it's possible that the person can go into physical shock, not just emotional, psychological shock, but physical shock from a really stressful trauma. So always be aware of the signs of physical shock, and they're listed there for you. Obviously, if you're a nurse, you know what they are, but that's a sign that the person needs to immediately lie down, put their feet above their heart, and you need to call 911. The next step is to get them stable, calm, and oriented. So using a calm and soothing voice, give them realistic reassurance. That does not mean that you can tell them everything's okay. You don't know if everything's okay, and you can't promise that everything will be okay. But you can tell them they're okay, they are safe right now, what they're feeling is common, normal, they're not going crazy, and that you're there to help them. You may offer them a chance to do some calming techniques with them, such as, can I get you a cool washcloth? Would you would you like to stretch? Would you like to roll your head with me? Clench and release your fists. Would you like to do some deep breathing with me? It will really help you to calm down. Offer that, don't force it. And then make sure that you provide repeated and simple information about what the situation is as you know it. And if you know what some of the next steps are, you can share that too. It's very stressful for people to just deal with rumors or the unknown. So, but keep it simple. Often they won't remember what you're telling them at that moment. So the simpler, the better. The next step is you want to get more information about how you can help them. So you're going to be offering them a drink, some food. You're going to have shared a little bit of information about what you know in terms of what the situation is. And now it's time to find out what they've been through. We used to think it was important for people to debrief in detail about their crisis experience, but research has shown that that is really not an effective way to speed recovery. And in some instances, as I said before, it can actually create more trauma and distress for a person. So your goal is not to find out every single detail of what they've been through, but you do want to know, are they hurt? Did they witness somebody else being hurt or death? Or, what was the extent of the trauma? Remember the 3 R's. You want to know what are your immediate concerns? So you may think you know how to help that person, but you don't. You should ask them. You may hear something you weren't expecting at all. Well, I want my house back, is maybe what you were expecting. But what they say to you is, I really need to find out about my son. I really need to make a call to my daughter and let her know I'm okay. I'm really concerned that I missed my medication this morning. Those are things you can't know. And by asking them what their concerns are and maybe probing a little, you can start giving them responsibility for their own recovery by supporting them in what they need. And then you listen and you take care of what you can, and you make a note of what you may need to suggest to them for further help. Simple reassurances are something we love to do in healthcare. We love to say, oh, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Everything's all right. I hear that from the mouth of nursing home workers a lot. The problem with that is, as I said before, it may not be accurate, and then you're giving a false reassurance. The other thing is that it can make people feel like their pain and what they're experiencing is being discounted or minimized, that you don't really get how much distress they are in. And instead of making them feel better, it might make them feel uncomfortable and less willing to be open with you about how they are feeling. They also may think, oh, why am I reacting this way? I'm really being hysterical. And they may begin to criticize themselves internally because you're telling them, cheer up, everything's going to be okay. You listen in a private and a caring way, and as I said before, don't pry. Some people may need to tell you everything that happened, and that's okay. But you don't want to pry, and as quickly as possible, you want to bring them back to a more positive, action-based discussion of what they can do next. So after you've heard what their needs are, wherever you can, you offer assistance. Now, you may not be able to fix what is going on with them, but the first thing you want to know is that you understood and heard them correctly. So the repeat back is a very good technique. So I heard you say that what you went through this morning was this, and what you really need to do next is this. Is that right? So that accomplishes 2 things. First of all, it makes sure that you did hear them correctly, and it gives them a chance to correct if they said something to you that now they're feeling may not be their most immediate concern. It also makes them feel heard, like you really are listening and you really do understand. So it helps calm them down. You problem solve with them as much as possible. Well, depending on what their problems were, you lost your medication. Do you happen to keep a list of that? Or do you have, did the nursing home send you with any records? Could we access a list of what your medications were? Or, you need a phone charger? Here, I've got one. Whatever it is, if you can help. And if not, the action planning for next steps is very helpful to them. Not everything they need to do, but maybe the next one or two things. Well, maybe we could get the phone number of your daughter, and when that person is off the phone, I can help you make a call. So you connect them with resources, and then if they give you information that you can't help them with, as much as possible, connect them with community members or assisting agencies that can. Their social supports are everything at this point in their life. It could be their family, it could be their friends, it could be clergy, it could be their pet, it could be a familiar caregiver, but those are the people they love and trust, and those are the people that can help them the most. Sometimes people are reluctant to reach out to their loved ones. They don't want to worry them. They don't want to burden them. And they feel embarrassed about how upset they are. So helping them by reassuring them that what they're feeling is normal, that they're not crazy, that this could be very worrisome to the people that know them and love them, and encouraging them to get connected with their supports is very, very, very helpful. Now, when you have met their needs, gathered information about how to help, and you understand that they're going through a lot of these psychological experiences that we just discussed, give them, if they are interested and if they're open, some suggestions about how to cope. The first is, it's normal to feel this way. You're not going crazy. Common reactions to stress are some of these things. And you don't want to plant the seed that they're not going to be able to sleep, but whatever you feel that they may be experiencing, you could say, people are often feeling like there's no hope. So reassuring them that those are things they may experience now, or they may experience later. And then do say, it's normal. I have some suggestions for you that may help you to feel more calm. Would you like to hear them? And offer them if the person says yes, and we'll talk about those in a second. The things we really don't want to say are, again, those false reassurances. Oh, you'll feel better tomorrow. Cheer up. It's not that bad. Other people went through way worse. Maybe you should see a doctor. Could be a very frightening thing to say to them. You don't want to tell them what they need. You don't know. Also, it takes that self-reliance away from them. All of a sudden, you're in charge instead of them being reliant on their own coping strategies. And it often is a mistake to say, I know what you're going through, because even if you've been through something similar, you may not have experienced it the way this person is experiencing it. It's okay to say, I've been through evacuations, I've been through car accidents, and I know how it made me feel. But to tell them that you know how they're feeling is what you want to avoid. So here are some things you can suggest. Very important. Breathing is a great technique for immediate relief from stress and anxiety, and to focus on a long inhale, a long exhale, demonstrate it for them. You could suggest these other things. Talk to your friends, get your family on the phone, do some stretching. What kind of music do you usually listen to feel better? Can I get you some music? Reach out to their clergy, a warm bath or a shower, and to make a list of things they can do to recover from their situation. Also, a healthy routine is critical. If they start skipping sleep, if they start skipping meals, if they're dehydrated, if they start drinking. These are things that are really going to slow their recovery. So encourage them to maintain a healthy routine. Then the next step would be, if you can, you link them to collaborative services. In your nursing home setting, this may be get them a referral to the doctor, connect them with the social worker, have the nurse come and do an assessment. Maybe the business office can help them with some financial questions. If it's in your community, get them some phone numbers. Help them to at least make a plan on how they're going to connect to services that they need. And remember that for most people, psychological first aid is enough. But if you recognize that they need more help, then it's okay to suggest that to them. And then finally, remember that for most people, psychological first aid is enough. What you're giving them and the few minutes that you're spending with them and the suggestions they're going to take away will get them on the road to recovery. But don't hesitate to suggest to those people that you recognize have the 3 R's or one of the 3 R's, that they may benefit from seeking professional help. And you can say it in a tactful way, like oftentimes people who have been through something like this really benefit from seeing a counselor. Do you think you'd like to talk to someone maybe in the next few days or weeks that can help you to come and recover even quicker? All right, that's the end of Module 2. The first question is, the purpose of psychological first aid is to prepare you to treat injuries after a disaster, to enable you to persuade someone not to harm themselves after a disaster, to enable you to provide comfort, care, and support to survivors of disasters, none of the above. Number 2, normal survivors are able to function just fine once the disaster is over and they are safe. True or false? Number 3, what are some examples of effective coping techniques? Rest sufficiently, eat well, drink fluids. Keep feelings to yourself, avoid your friends and families. Focus on slow, deep breaths. Have a few alcoholic beverages. The first question is, the purpose of psychological first aid is to prepare you to treat injuries after a disaster, to enable you to persuade someone not to harm themselves after a disaster, to enable you to provide comfort, care, and support to survivors of disasters, none of the above. And the answer to this is C. Remember that if you've ever taken a first aid class, you didn't come out of there with a medical degree. And now that you've taken a psychological first aid class, you're not coming out as a mental health professional. So psychological first aid is really just those first steps of offering people comfort, calm, and a plan for moving on. Number 2, normal survivors are able to function just fine once the disaster is over and they are safe. The answer to this is false. Normal survivors take a while. They have a sense of confusion over being overwhelmed, and it is common for them to experience the reactions that we discussed earlier. Number 3, what are some examples of effective coping techniques? The answer to this is E, A, and C. Now we're going to start module number 3. And this is designed for you to use as a learning activity, as well as giving people a chance to role play some of the techniques that we've described, and that will help them to feel much more comfortable and to use these techniques more freely. Do's and don'ts. When you are providing someone with psychological first aid, body language is really important. So I suggest that if you're doing this in a classroom setting, that you have your partners pair up, or you have a volunteer come to the front of the class, and you demonstrate positive body language, which is to sit facing the person or beside them, to give respectful eye contact, and show attention by leaning forward and maybe keeping your hands open or down at your side. And also demonstrate the negative body language, which would be to sit back with your arms folded in a very closed way, to look around distractedly like you're not really listening, checking your phone when people are talking to you, or to get up and leave before they're done talking to you. So these things can be acted out, and I think it'd be fun and really bring the point across. Some things to say, some of the positive language is, can we talk about what happened, as an opening kind of question and asking permission to sit down and really begin this process with a person. This must be difficult for you is a very, very neutral thing to say. You're not saying you know what they're going through, and you're not trying to fix it, but you will make them feel heard and calm. Is there anything I can do for you right now? That's the physical needs or the safety needs or the thing that's worrying them the most. Reassuring again that it's normal if they start sharing with you how they're feeling or you notice it. And I'm here to help you if I can. Things not to say, as we discussed before: I know what you're going through. Don't feel so bad. You're strong. You'll get through this. Don't cry. Cheer up. It's going to be okay. It's God's will, and it could have been much worse. These are, again, a way to make a person feel less willing to talk to you and like their pain isn't really being heard. This YouTube is optional. It's a 7-minute role-playing YouTube video done by a university medical center. I think it's very good because it shows a nurse and her coworker, and the nurse is actually very stressed out from being in a center where she's giving vaccinations in a pandemic flu outbreak, and the coworker helps her using the techniques. So if you have time to watch it, I think it's very helpful. My suggestion to you for a learning activity is that you, again, pick a partner. One of the people in your class, one of the students is a survivor, and the other is the helper, and then they switch roles. And I have 2 cases here where they can practice the techniques that you've just learned. So the first role play is: this morning there was an earthquake that shook things off shelves, caused the fire sprinklers to go off, and knocked out the power to your skilled nursing facility. Several hours have passed and things have settled down, but it's starting to get dark and the power is still out. You notice one of your alert female residents wandering around the halls, and she's refusing to go in her room. Practice the principles of psychological first aid to calm and reassure this person. So the helper is going to make the connection, provide safety and comfort, stabilize, get some information, offer practical assistance, connect to social supports. In your case, that might be talking to the social worker or, the mental health workers, give them information on coping. And then if they need to link to collaborative services, that may not be appropriate in this situation, or it might. And you'll watch your students and give feedback. Then they'll switch roles, and the person that was the helper will now be the survivor. There was a fire at a nearby nursing home that killed 2 residents and forced all to evacuate. Your facility wasn't impacted, but it accepted 5 emergency admits from the burned facility. One of the admits is a male resident whose roommate was actually killed in the fire. You see him in his wheelchair in the corner of the dining room, weeping quietly and muttering to himself. Practice the principles of psychological first aid to calm and comfort him. So the core actions we just described will be used by the helper to begin the conversation, to sit down, offer physical comfort, but within a few minutes, the survivor will say, I can't go on like this. I can't take this anymore. I just want to die. What is your next step? And of course, what you're looking for there is for them to send for help or to ask someone to sit with the resident while they get the nurse or the doctor, because this person is expressing feelings of wanting to harm themselves. So our objectives today are to teach you the importance of recognizing the impact, psychological impact that people experience when they are involved in a disaster or even a traumatic event that causes a change to their life somehow, and to recognize the common reactions that people will often exhibit after going through that disaster-related stress. We've discussed psychological first aid as an approach that you can use that will help people to recover more quickly and get on the road to recovery in a way that is positive after they've gone through the event. Also, this approach can be used wherever you see people going through intense stress. It can be used with your family, with your coworkers, with your residents, and your friends, and even yourself. So I think you'll find it to be of value above and beyond its relevance to the emergency preparedness scenario. Additional resources for you if you want to learn more about psychological first aid are here. All of these websites are free and they have information for you. And we've provided you with a handout that summarizes the steps of psychological first aid that you can give to all your students, and also one that summarizes the most common reactions, as you saw on one of the slides, that people experience after going through a traumatic event. So I hope you have found this resource helpful. If you ever do find yourself in a disaster and you want to access more resources for psychological first aid as well as disaster counseling, these are national resources that you can contact. Actually, the first one is a state resource, and get a list of mental health professionals. Also talk to a real person in terms of the disaster distress helpline, and start that process right away. This is Jocelyn Montgomery for the California Association of Health Facilities. Thank you very much, and I hope this webinar will be helpful to you and your students.